time for Korea Book Club, our weekly segment where we explore the world of Korean literature and books, through notable recent works in Korean and English translation. Joining me today, we have with us cultural essayist Colin Marshall, host of the podcast Korea24 한국 and the author of essay collection 한국 유학 금지. Colin, hello.
Thanks for having me, Jen.
What book have you brought in for our listeners on this very first edition of Book Club for 2025?
Well, it's the very first book I've read in 2025 myself, Kim Eui-kyung's new short story collection, 두리안의 맛. And unlike many of the titles of the Korean books I read here, this one wouldn't be hard to translate into English. The Taste of Durian, let's say. Mm-hmm. And for listeners who may not know, durian is a fruit, albeit not one very often encountered here in Korea. It's actually native to Southeast Asia, with most of the varieties originating in Thailand, not all of which have the off-putting smell for which durian is known far and wide. In any case, most people who try it when they go to Thailand, or wherever it grows, seem to find the taste sweet and the texture smooth, which is also the experience of the protagonist of this book's title story.
Well, I found that durian is certainly a love it or hate it kind of a produce. Now, I take it the story, as you said, is set in Thailand.
Yes, this story, the title story of the collection, is about a trip to Thailand that this character Yoon-ji, a power blogger who has made her name writing about restaurants, gets offered for free. And this is something travel companies sometimes do, organizing a trip for media people in hopes of getting some organic-seeming promotion out of their coverage for the press or their social media posts. Now, for Yoon-ji, who's still a student, this invitation comes as a thrilling opportunity, and in fact, it's her first ever trip abroad. But for the other invitees, who include famous travel bloggers and journalists, it's just another business trip. And so their attitude puts kind of a damper on Yoon-ji's experience right away, as do the Instagram comments her photos keep getting that seem to have a resentful tone, like, oh, must be nice to travel in luxury. Well, some of us have to work like dogs, that sort of thing. And she does get moments to marvel at things like the amenities of the five-star hotel where they stay in Bangkok and the ocean view at the island resort in which they're put up later. But on the whole, the experience is hollowed out by small disappointments every step of the way. Disappointment she knows she'll have to leave out of the blog post she's expected to write. And alas, as she ultimately learns, nothing in this world is truly free. Mm-hmm. Now, this story takes place at a very specific point in time, May 2022, during the latter half of the COVID-19 pandemic, which we all remember, and when certain countries like Thailand were announcing themselves as open again for certain kinds of tourism. Almost all of this book's 8 stories are explicitly or implicitly set during the pandemic, with characters pulling down their masks to talk or worrying about an ailing parent's potential to be exposed to the virus, details like that. In her afterword, Kim Eui-kyung writes that not only did the pandemic it gave her more time to write, but also it gave her a kind of inspiration because life had become more unstable. People were more worried about what they'd do if they had to move or if they lost their job, especially the kind of people she tends to write about.
Well, I remember at that very troubling time when it was a time of introspection, rather, for all of us. And many of us did not have a chance to travel abroad as this protagonist. And you mentioned that the protagonist of the title story, 두리안의 맛, is a student and a blogger. And as you said, this is her first time abroad.
The very first, yes.
And her restaurant reviews may be well known, but she sounds like an ordinary person otherwise. Do other stories also deal with people like her, the kind of us, that we may know about?
Well, you could say that Kim Eui-kyung writes realistically about ordinary people, although I'd say she probably focuses on a socioeconomic class slightly lower than most of her readers. So 2 of her previous books are titled call center and showroom, which are, of course, Koreanizations of the terms call center and showroom, 2 of the places where their characters work. And unglamorous though such occupations may be, they're still a cut above the work done by most of the characters in 두리안의 맛. Several of them are pairs of women, friends who work together. In one story, they get on They get by on dangi alba, or very short-term jobs posted to the internet. One day they're packing boy band CDs into paper sleeves. The next they're preparing food at a wedding hall. Very Korean jobs. The book's opening story follows another couple of young ladies as they undergo the suiting up and decontamination process that sounds so serious you'd think they were preparing to fabricate semiconductors or something. But in fact, they turn out to be working at a samgak gimbap factory. A job not affected by the pandemic. The other employees there seem to be a generation or two older than them, and one elderly woman remarks that student-age hires like them usually can't take the work for long before quitting, and they last a few days. And reading that, I was reminded of a story my dad once told me about a summer job he had back in Chicago in the 1960s, at a box factory, I think. And all the full-time workers there called him college boy. When he protested, he's still in high school, they said, yeah, but you're going to college. And that was the distinction. The characters in Kim Eui-kyung's story here are, in fact, college girls, or at least they would be college girls, had various misfortunes not forced them to suspend their studies. Before the samgak gimbap factory, they worked at a macaron shop and even enjoyed it, but that wound up being one of the businesses taken out by the pandemic, forcing them to move along.
Of course, and these aren't the kind of jobs or settings you can make up without at least having some first-hand experience. And it is not unknown for novelists to work years in part-time or, as you said, 단기 알바 jobs, especially in the service industry, or even working in manual labor stints before they can write full-time. Was that the case for the author, Kim Eui-kyung?
Well, 두리안의 includes an essay from the critic, Ho Hee, who does make reference to the author's period of surviving through a series of different Arbeit, which usually gets translated as part-time jobs, although they can take up more than full-time hours in some cases. In any case, they're not careers, and certainly not careers to which anyone aspires. It may be normal enough to do that kind of work in your 20s, but it's something else entirely to be doing it in your 40s, which is the situation of the pair of friends, another pair, at the center of a story called Hokangse, a combination of the words hotel, or hotel, and bakangse, the form the French vacances has taken in Korean. It means just to spend your vacation in a hotel in your own city, or not far from it, and that's just what the pair of friends in that story figure they might as well do, having no romantic or professional prospects to speak of. They book a stay at a fancy hotel here in Seoul, but end up spending much of the time reading books in their room, or eating pizza and tteokbokki while drinking lots of wine.
Well, as they say, life is a tragedy in close-up and a comedy in long shot.
Indeed.
Does Kim Eui-kyung's tone lean into one of these direction or the other?
I'd say she leans funny at some points and more sad at others, with a wide variety of other emotional notes also struck within a span of relatively few pages. She definitely doesn't shy away from grim material in these stories, but more troubling than their use of cancer, prostitution, drugs, suicide, it's all here, is their portrayal of characters who seem to have simply missed their shot in an existential sense. By the time you get toward the end of 두리안의, you're definitely ready for something a bit lighter. And Kim Eui-kyung delivers it with a closing story about another young lady at loose ends, this one hired as a kind of tour guide by a middle-aged Singaporean actor in Korea. He chooses her because she was a high school classmate of the singer IU, of whom he's an obsessive fan, and because she's willing to drive him all the way down to Mokpo, the setting of a TV drama in which IU once acted. It actually brought back a few memories of mine, since I happened to have made a trip to Mokpo with my wife during the pandemic. And much like the narrator herself, I can't claim to either like or to dislike IU. I wasn't there for IU-related reasons, but the kind of worshipful enthusiasm in which the Singaporean actor engages does, in the end, have a kind of purity about it. However well or poorly your life may be going, I suppose you've just got to be into something.
Of course, and I think this is what many Korean authors do quite well, whether they're writing a novel or a series of short stories or even a screenplay. They manage to convey a sense of black humor in the darkest and most grim storyline. Well, thank you, Colin, for introducing our listeners to 두리안의 or The Taste of Durian, and I hope to talk to you soon.
Thank you, Ijin.
And that brings us to the end of today's edition of Korea24. We hope you'll join us tomorrow when Chang-woo returns to the driver's seat to bring you more news, views and reviews from Korea. I've been your host, Gu-Jin. Thank you, as always, for listening. Goodbye.